New City. Here is the teaching video for this week. We're still in John's Gospel, chapter 13, and we're in the second half. And I just want to draw your attention to two verses. It's verse 31 and verse 32. So open your Bible, turn on your Bible app, and we will go through it if you haven't already. Okay, verse 31, let's do it. When he, that's Judas, had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. And if God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once." I had to, when I was reading over this second half of the chapter, those two verses just kept sticking out to me. And so I thought, well, look, I should probably investigate here. And I think the main thing is, I think the word glory is used 5 or 6 times in the space of 2 verses, and it kind of feels like a little bit out of sync with the rest of the narrative in chapter 13. You know, Jesus is in the upper room having his last supper with his disciples. He washes their feet. He then identifies Judas as the betrayer, and then he says this. And that word glory, I don't think I ever use it. Or maybe like sometimes I go, oh, what a glorious day, sometimes to my kids to try and be funny. But other than that, I never use that word glory or glorified, other than, you know, when we're in church or in church circles. And I guess that word glory is kind of a Christian platitude sometimes, or Christian speak. We kind of use it so many times in particular way that it kind of loses its weight and meaning. And I was like, okay, what does this actually mean? What does this word mean? And what is Jesus trying to say here in this moment? And so I consulted Google Dictionary. And so Google identifies kind of 2 main meanings for this word glory or glorify. The first one is giving status and recognition for people or things that have achieved a lot. And so they use the example of a statue. And so, you know, I just think of, you know, that Mark Richards statue down at Nobby's Beach, which shows him, you know, at his best in his prime as one of Australia's best known surfers in the day, and a real legend for Newcastle surfing and Newcastle community. The other definition is around glory in the sense of beauty and nature. And so, you know, if you're seeing a beautiful natural landscape, there's just a glory that is kind of bestowed upon you, almost like a transcendent kind of feeling. And I was just thinking, you know, watching, you know, nature documentaries with my kids, and the other day we're watching one on the Arctic tundra, and there was in the middle of winter these beautiful kind of ice sculptures that have been formed naturally from the weather and the wind. And Oscar just next to me goes, "Oh, that's beautiful, Dad." Like out of the blue. I never heard him say anything like that before, but kind of getting a sense of something that is beautiful in nature. And this word glory is used hundreds of times in the scriptures, right? And that's probably why we talk like that in church circles, right? We use it because it's pointed to and used in the scriptures. And, you know, I think of Psalm 19, you know, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims his handiwork." You know, that's classic, like glory and looking to the sky for transcendence, but it's not pointing to itself, it's pointing to God. Or then I think of, you know, Luke 2 verses 8 to 9, when Jesus is born and the shepherds are tending in the field, and then the angel of the Lord comes to them, and it says the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with fear, you know. And so glory is kind of a light, a shining light that is magnified in the presence of God's angel. Or then I think of, what's the other one? 1 Corinthians 10:31, right? "With all that you do it for the glory of God." You know, and that's kind of, I guess, touching on this idea that everything that we have is a gift from God. And so there's a recognition of that. And so thinking about everything that we do and giving thanks and I guess recognition that it's because of God that we get to do and have and all these things. And so you just quickly get to see that this word glory is kind of used in a whole bunch of different scenarios and contexts, and meaning kind of the same thing, but also slightly different things. And it's rooted in this kind of Hebrew word, kabod. That's kabod, right? And it's means to have kind of weight, or to have kind of a heaviness or a weight to it. And it's used particularly in the Old Testament, interchangeably, both literally and metaphorically. So it's used literally to mean something that is heavy, like a man falls over and the weight is too much for him. Or it's also used as a metaphor, like something has significance and a weight to it, right? And so I guess in some ways, when we use that word heavy or weighty, I think of, we talk about, oh, I've got a heavy heart. That's a metaphor for feeling that you're feeling kind of downcast or whatever, or you've had a heavy week or a heavy day. You've had a tough day. You've had a really significant day. And so I guess when the word glory or glorified is used, it's kind of used to mean something that has a weight or a significance beyond the actual physical meaning or the situation at hand. And I think that's really helpful, because it kind of gives us an insight as to what Jesus is doing in glorifying God in this moment, and God is actually glorifying Jesus in this moment, and as he goes to the cross and is resurrected. So as I said earlier, the situation Jesus is in, he's in the upper room with his disciples, and this is John's version of the Last Supper. He washes his disciples' feet and kind of alludes to, this is what I'm going to do for you, as a symbol of me dying on the cross for you. But also I want you to serve each other in this way, as a servant washes his master's feet. And then after that, he points out Judas to be his betrayer. He whispers in Judas's ear, and then Judas leaves the room and kind of kick-starts the procedure of informing the Jewish leaders, who eventually arrest or capture Jesus. And then Jesus says his Dr. Zeus glorify riddle between him and the Father. And then straight after, he has this kind of beautiful line where he says, little children, I'm only with you a little longer, and where I'm going you can't go, but I'm giving you this new commandment, just as I have loved you, love one another. By this you are my disciples. You must love one another, right? And then Peter again kind of pipes up and says, Lord, where are you going? I'll go and follow you wherever. I'll lay my life down for you. And then Jesus kind of prophetically says, you say you lay your life down for me, but truly I say to you, the rooster will not crow 3 times until you have denied me. And so there's that, famous line where we see when the rooster crows, when Jesus is hanging on the cross, is the time when Peter actually denies Jesus 3 times, when he's interrogated and questioned by people around Jesus' death. And so this is the scenario where Jesus is talking about glorifying God, giving a weight and a beauty to the truth of God, his plans, and his presence, right? And so, again, this isn't exactly a Mark Richards moment. Jesus isn't exactly winning, surf titles. It's not even, I guess, a beautiful natural landscape, I'm guessing, when Jesus is saying this. But what he's doing is he's kind of using this word to give kind of new meaning as to what God is on about and what God is valuing and kind of giving a weight to, right? The things of God. And he's kind of zoning in on Jesus's self-sacrificial love to the disciples around him and to ultimately the world as he heads to the cross and is crucified. And then, we're told that God will glorify him at once, and most scholars think that is referring to Jesus being raised back to life, a real kind of lifting up and showing the power and majesty of God through that miraculous event. I just want to take two kind of key points here for us to kind of ponder on from this passage. The first one, we see, God's glory and the glory of Jesus, the weight and beauty of Jesus as he begins his work, his great saving work on the cross. And that is in spite of the shortcomings of his disciples and everybody else, as we know the story. And so, you see, Jesus being betrayed by one of his closest followers, Judas, and handing him over, undermining him as a leader and as a human being. You see Peter, with great intentions, eventually betraying him publicly, saying, I never knew the man, I got nothing to do with him. And I think, there's this kind of beautiful juxtaposition between the faithfulness and glory and weight of God's love through what Jesus is doing for his disciples, his enemies, and for all humanity. But then also the kind of shortcomings of human beings. We are all, at times, we betray others. We undermine others, both unintentionally and intentionally. We also deny the truth of God, or we publicly shame others in different ways. And so, if anything, this kind of truth, which is the truth, the personal truth of the good news, is that in spite of us dropping the ball and really kind of falling short of the standard to glorify God, Jesus shows this beautiful, weighty act of salvation through death on the cross, and he rose again. That should really kind of challenge our self-righteousness, our kind of thinking that we can do it all on our own, or we can rise to God's standards like Peter is trying to do, and should focus us on the uncompromising love and grace and beauty of God's glory through Jesus on the cross. The second one that I think we need to focus on is a little bit more of an exemplary one. And Jesus here is in probably the toughest season of his earthly life, or he's entering into the toughest season of his earthly life. And he's really glorifying God in the midst of it. The way he carries himself is trusting God and following. He's loving his betrayer Judas. He just washed his feet. He offered him some bread, and he's not retaliating against Judas. But then also with Peter, he's getting alongside Peter and kind of coaching him and gently reminding him that in spite of Peter's intentions, he's going to fall short too. And so we see Jesus from this moment on go into kind of conflict and violence, not caused by him or him even retaliating, but him kind of receiving it. And he's kind of carrying himself in a way that actually gives glory and honor to God. It's kind of this beautiful way that he's carrying himself. And so for us, I'm not suggesting that we become like a doormat or whatever and just take, abuse or brutality or whatever like that. But it should cause us to pause to think about, how do we handle tough moments? Do we glorify God in those moments of potentially conflict, or times when we feel undermined by others in community, times where we're kind of publicly shamed or we're delegitimized in front of others, as a public spectacle, maybe, in social media or even just in real life. How do you glorify God in that? What does it look like to be Jesus-like in those spaces? And I think this is this beautiful way that us in community can also walk humbly in the way of Jesus.